Hey, I'm so excited that y'all are tuning in to this episode of You Can't Come Over, but You Can Come In. Yeah, you can't come over, but you can come in. I'm sorry. It's been a long 2020, folks. Anyways, today's episode is one of the highlights of the year for me, and that is one of my very best friends, Jessie Jo Dillon, agreed to be on the show. So before I get to my conversation with Jessie, I wanted to play y'all a few of her songs so that if you don't know who she is, you'll know her songs. This has, been one of the biggest songs of the year. Dan and Shay and Justin Bieber. I'm going to sing just a little bit of the chorus. I'd spend 10,000 hours, 10,000 more, if that's what it takes to learn that sweetheart of yours. And I might never get there, but I'm gonna try. If it's 10,000 hours or the rest of my life, I'm gonna love you. I'm gonna love you. I think you'd probably have to be under a rock to have missed that song this year. I'm gonna play a couple songs Jessie and I have written. This one I have not. I did not write with Jessie. I think this was Jessie's first #1 actually, and I secretly always wanted Jessie's first #1 to be with me, but it wasn't. Hopefully we'll have a #1 here at some point. But this is one of those songs, I always measure songs by what would I have given to have written that song. I think maybe I've talked about that. This is one that I would give something to have written. I'd still walk in that bar a little drunk. I'd still ask you what you're drinking, what's your name. I'd still kiss you by the shuffleboard, last call at 2 a.m., even though we break up in the end. I'd introduce you to my mom and dad. Say I think I love her when you leave the room. I'd still not take their advice when I say you're moving in, even though we break up in the end. Even if I knew you'd be the one that got away, I'd still go back and get you. Even if I knew you'd be my best and worst mistake, oh, I'd still make it with you over and over, again and again, even though we break up in the end. So those are a couple of hits Jessie's had. She also had a big hit on Maren Morris, Rich, and she has Maren's current single, To Hell and Back. Maren's a badass singer, and I couldn't tackle that stuff. But anyways, if you're looking for more Jessie, that she's got cuts on everybody right now, but those are, like I said, Rich, and then To Hell and Back, Maren's current single. So here's one that Jessie and I wrote with Shane McAnally. When you took me home, you knew who you were taking. Not some Debbie debutante standing in an apron, frying up your bacon. My house and my mouth and my mind get kind of trashy. I've never been to jail, but hell, I wouldn't put it past me. So if you want the girl next door, some Virgin Mary metaphor, your cardboard cutout on the wall, your paper roll, your Barbie doll with perfect hair and a perfect dress. I'm really just the perfect mess, and I ain't nothing less or nothing more. So baby, if you want the girl next door, go next door and go right now, and don't look back, don't turn around, don't call me when you get bored. Yeah, if you want the girl next door, then go next door. So that was one we wrote a while back. Here's one that we wrote for this latest project, I'll Be the Sad Song. Jesse wrote, man, I think the lion's share of the songs on this record with me. Used to want to be a cowboy, a shadow in a sunset. That's why I started smoking cigarettes. Used to want to be a cowboy, used to want to be Elvis, drive a pink Cadillac car. That's why I learned to play the guitar. Used to want to be Elvis. There's a lot of things I used to want to do till I met you. Now I want to be honest. Now I want to be better. Now I want to be the me I should have been when we were together. I want to be at least almost close to worth your love. I want to be who you thought I was. So I'm not going to keep you all any longer. Obviously, based on the songs I just played you, Jessie Jo Dillon is an extraordinarily talented human being. What I hope you get from our conversation is also what an intelligent, interesting, multi-layered character, one of my favorite characters in life, one of the best friends I've ever had in life, one of the best hearts. So anyways, I hope y'all enjoy Jessie Jo every bit as much as I do. So hey everybody, like I promised in the intro, here's Jessie Jo Dillon.
Hey B, what's happening?
Not much. I'm so happy that you did this. I have to be honest, this is the one I've been the most excited for, but also the most nervous.
I know, it's funny.
Well, it's because I know you probably better than any other guest I've had. And so it's like, oh, what do I ask her that I don't know? And I don't want to ask you things I don't know as much as I want to ask you some things that I know about you that people on this show or that watch this show would love. And just so you know, from the beginning, much like Leslie Fram, you have been somebody that people have asked for.
Oh my God, that makes me feel good, y'all. Dang.
You, Leslie, and Lori McKenna.
Well, I'm like the best company ever. And Gail.
Gail, you know what? Gail was asked for. I don't like to say that because her head gets too big.
I know. I mean, it's hard. I haven't even told her she's my favorite episode because she just started acting out.
So the first question I love to ask everybody is, what was the first song you remember as a child that made you want to write songs?
Oh, gosh. I mean, that question's so funny because I don't know if you feel like this, but I feel like growing up, all of these songs, like subconsciously, when you were really little, were making you want to write songs. Mm-hmm. And there's like classic rock and classic country songs for me. I definitely would be lying if I didn't say, though, that I was probably like 14 or 15. I was leaving a soccer game. My friend Mark had played in the game, and he was driving. And I was sitting in the back seat, and it was the first time I heard this guy named Connor Oberst. He's a singer-songwriter who's been in tons of bands. One of his most famous ones was Bright Eyes. And it was his record Lifted, and he had a song called Lover I Don't Have to Love, which sounds very
I love that title.
I know, it sounds very Lord Byron, which began to, like, besides reading some of my love for these dramatic, like, breakup or whatever type songs. And I remember thinking, this is so cool. I've never really heard anything like this. And then I remember going home and like trying to find out about him and knowing that he was under like 25 years old, which that's freaking psycho looking back on it. But then it made me feel like, well, I'm not that far away from that old. Mm-hmm. Maybe I could write songs. Do you know what I mean?
Totally. Like, I completely, one of the things I've always, from the time I met you, that's always been so intriguing to me about you, you mentioned Connor Oberst. I hate to admit this, but I didn't know who that was when I met you.
I know.
And you made me a mixtape early on.
I did.
A CD, but it was, and that's where I learned that. And I've learned from that mixtape what eclectical, I don't think that's a word, eclectic musical taste you have, which is amazing.
That might even come from my parents, because my mom listened to everything. I mean, she's just a music lover, and most people don't know this. They know more about my dad, but my mom was in A&R at Warner Brothers when she got pregnant with me. So she then, I feel like I wrecked her career in a way. Not really, but she just has always been, you know, any great A&R person, I think, is a music lover. So I had all those songs, and it was just, and then like, you know, you're a part of the Napster generation a little bit where you just tried to download everything back when you didn't know buying music illegally. I mean, getting music illegally was bad.
Now, that's a story I love. So those of you that don't know, which I'm sure most of you do, Jessie Jo's mom is Kenny Wehrman Dillon.
Yes.
Dad is Dean Dillon, Hall of Fame songwriter. So she comes from songwriting and country music royalty. I love the story about when you told your dad you'd found his songs on Napster.
Oh, yeah. I remember we were in the car and he was like, Jessie Jo, you are stealing out of your own pocket. Because you know, at school, you were just like, oh, we can get this music. I mean, people ask me a lot too, like, did it occur to you, your dad being music? And it's like, yes and no. I mean, I was just downloading music like everyone else, not knowing it was bad. And then I remember that big drama between like, oh gosh, it was like Dave Matthews and Metallica, and everybody was hating on them for being like, hey, don't steal our stuff. A weird thing.
I remember that too. And I'm older than you, so I was in my 20s when Napster was coming out. And I remember thinking it was the coolest thing too. And I didn't realize the way they presented it, you could find anything. It was like a candy store.
Oh, totally. And then, God, I mean, I don't know if any of y'all have seen that movie Social Network, but I remember when the irony of Justin Timberlake playing the guy who started Napster in that scene where he's like, I mean, come on, I took down the whole music industry. I just wanted to go through the screen and strangle him. Because now we know way better than that, but it is interesting. It was marketed, like LimeWire, Napster, all that stuff. It was like, oh, I can get songs, cool, you know.
So I wrote down some questions and you led me right into my next question, talking about your parents. Having your parents, your mom being an A&R person, your dad being a songwriter, artist, was there any part of you that wanted to rebel against songwriting? Like,
oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, especially country.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I moved to LA, as you know, after I graduated high school, just to be away from my hometown, even though I feel like deep down I still wanted to write songs, but I was hyper intimidated of my dad, and by no fault of his own. I mean, he would have done nothing but encourage me, but I was real secretive. And I remember a lady named Kathleen Carey that I met with out there was like, go home, you write country songs. Sorry you don't like that you write country songs, but you do, you know? And she said it in a sweet way, like you could do this for a living if you wanted, but I definitely think, I mean, did you ever rebel against like your grandma Ruth and your mom's taste, like go off into anything?
I remember my grandma being disappointed when I told her I liked Michael Jackson, because she would say, and I've said this at shows a lot, but she felt like there were two kinds of music, country and Western. And she had no time for anything else.
Yes.
And I went through a period of time where I didn't want to like country. And then, but I have to say, the thing that made it absolutely irresistible to me was what they call the class of '89, which was when Garth and Alan Jackson and Clint Black and Vince Gill and Travis Tritt, when all those artists came out, and you know, a couple of years later it was Mary Chapin Carpenter, and Patti Loveless had come out before those guys, but you know, really hit in the '90s, and there was no turning it back. I mean, and the truth is, I always loved country. Like the real, you know, because my grandma I grew up next door to her, and so they were listening to things that were further removed from the radio. Like I remember my parents were listening to like Alabama and Exile, and that was kind of a more poppy country of the time.
Right.
And then Grandma and Pop were listening to Merle Haggard. Loretta and George Jones. And so, yeah, I think there was definitely a part of me that didn't want, it was a little closeted country, you know? And my brother.
Wow, what irony.
I know, crazy, huh? Closeted.
I know.
My brother, I remember in high school, you know, like where they took them out of our yearbooks, but like, some people call them superlatives, like most likely to succeed, all that. So my brother, everybody had like a little interview, and it said, CD you're most embarrassed to own. And I remember he wrote the Bellamy Brothers. And I was really I was hurt by that, because
I know.
I had come back around to being out about my love of country music. So
And he was in the full-on, like, rejection of it, but still loving it deep down.
Oh, totally. He completely.
Yeah.
A fun fact about Jessie and I that a lot of people don't know, one of my first jobs in Nashville, I worked at Franklin Road Academy in the aftercare. And I remember I would be outside pushing kids on the swing set, watching the track team, and Jessie Jo was on the track team.
I know, full circle. I mean,
yeah, and that school had, I know, like, I had one of Alan Jackson's girls.
Maddie, I bet. I wonder.
In my pre-K.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then like you were there, and I remember you said one of his older daughters was in the mix of school.
Yeah, she played basketball. She was a great basketball player, and he would come to our games sometimes, and it would always make me sad because he would come real like low key and sit in the very back. And the second one person came up to him, it was like all over, because then it was like a distraction, and he would always get up and leave, and I was like, he just wanted to watch his daughter. But way down yonder on the Chattahoochee. I mean,
yeah,
gotta expect it. I mean, once it's been that cool and big.
There were positives to it.
Oh yeah.
Another thing I wanted to ask you is, to you, what is the best thing about being a songwriter in today's world, and what is the worst?
Oh my gosh. The best thing to me, and this is recently, I guess I've seen this, is that it does feel like you can kind of be, and I guess songwriters have always been able to do this, but a chameleon. Like, you can live in different types of songs, whatever feels good to you, whether it's like pop music or country music. I just, seeing with 10,000 Hours, a song that I had out with Dan and Shane Bieber, I mean, I never would have dreamed of writing a song Justin Bieber was on. Do you know what I mean? But it's just fun, I guess. Like, it feels like there's no glass ceiling about it. And the worst, I mean, gosh, I have so many thoughts on that. That's like a layered question. I definitely think
people on this show will love to hear it.
I definitely think, because I get frustrated by this a lot, and with watching it with friends and myself, is radio sometimes. I mean, these great songs get put out there and maybe they don't work and you don't understand why. And some people, it's hard, at least for me, to completely rise above that all the time. Like, and I know you are the same way. It's just, there's days it just kind of knocks you to your knees, you know? It's like, I always tell Heddle and Mike, our publishers, I'm like, it's like you're out on the battlefield and I've just taken a couple arrows this week that it just bums you out. When you feel like you've done your best work or something and it's not, you know.
I completely get that. I mean, I saw an interview one time with Willie Nelson, and they asked him, would you rather be good or lucky? And he said lucky. And I also saw an interview with Tim Dubois, who's somebody I really respect. And he was talking about people, like, he was talking specifically about artists, and artists it works for and artists it doesn't. And he was talking about an artist he had worked with, Brad Paisley, who was highly successful.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, they were saying how great Brad was, and Tim didn't want to take away from any of that, but he said he also got very lucky. Yeah. And there's not, I mean, for me, the songs that I've had, the things that have happened for me, and I know you probably feel the same way, there was an element of luck involved.
Oh, yes. I think we'd all be lying if we said it wasn't, you know, because I feel like, and we talk about this all the time, even just in writing mode for you, before you're like full blown in a record, it's like we could write the best song in the world, and if nobody else thinks so, did we? You know, it kind of becomes like the chicken and the egg type of a conversation. And yeah, I just think that I'd rather be lucky too. I agree with Willie. I mean, the stars have to align for all this. Artists launching artist careers, songwriter careers, hit songs. I feel like there's all this like pixie dust in it, you know?
I mean, I remember you talk about 10,000 Hours, which is one of the songs I did in the little Jessie Jo medley before. I did the chorus and told anybody, if you don't know this song, you've been living under a rock. I remember us being in New York for it was something I don't know if it was it wasn't.
We were up there you were doing your Grammy museum, and we were doing that, and then we saw
maybe.
Yeah, AMP. That's right. We were doing a panel. Duh. Mm-hmm. And then we got to see Robert's musical,
Robert
Tootsie.
Horn. Yes.
Yes.
He had just won a Tony for Tootsie.
I know, it was amazing.
But you had gone, Alex Heddle, who is like one of your major champions in your career. We all need those. Great song person, just great all around. Didn't he take you like to have a drink or something?
Okay, so yeah, Dan Smyers from Dan and Shay had texted me while we were at the play or the musical, and he was like, hey, I just saw you were in New York. We want to meet up with you. And I honestly wasn't really sure what it was about. I had a feeling it was about 10,000 hours, but I hadn't heard if it had been recorded or anything. So after the musical, you went to bed because you had to sing the next day. And me and Heddle went and met them. And so we're all hanging out eating. And then Dan's like, can you guys come back to my hotel room? I want to play you something. So we get there and he's like got his computer and the headphones. It was so sweet. It says so much about who he is. I mean, because these kind of moments, somebody doesn't care to make them happen all the time. And so he was holding the headphones, I'll never forget. And he was like, oh yeah, and guess what? Justin Bieber's singing on this. And I was like, that's funny. And he was like, no, I'm serious. And I was like, stop. Okay, I just want to hear it. And he was like, no, he's singing. And he like dropped them on my head. And I mean, I cried. I just could not believe it. I mean, Dan has a video of it too. And then Heddle completely lost his mind because they like surprised us kind of one by one, which was funny.
Oh, so Alex didn't know either.
No.
Okay.
And at that point, he just thought, oh my gosh, they recorded 10,000 hours, but he didn't know about the feature. And so it was just him and Mike both were like, oh my gosh, so it was amazing.
Well, I was going to say, and before you came on, I talked a little bit about what a year you've had with Break Up in the End, Rich, 10,000 Hours, To Hell and Back. That's just talking about some big singles, not even about all your cuts. But you mentioned how your favorite part of being a songwriter is you can write pop, you can write country, I think you could write for musicals. But I think, Jessie, everybody has, we all have certain gifts. And I think everybody has several, but I would say from the time I met you, you have this intrinsic editor, I would call it bar. I remember when I first started writing with you, you were somewhere between 22 and 24, which is around the age I was when I moved to Nashville. And I remember thinking, oh my God, Jessie's idea already of where the song needs to be. It took me years to learn that. I don't know if it's because you grew up with parents that were involved in great music, but I also think your editor button is fantastic.
Thank you so much for saying that.
You bet, it's true. And I think that's why you can write something like 10,000 Hours and then something like Break Up in the End, because you're just in service to the song and trying to make it as good as you can make it.
Totally. And I think that on my best days, and most just pure songwriters would say that that's what you're doing. I mean, every song you write can't be the dance, Mm-hmm. I just made Ben's name pop up, I think, of the Zoom name. But I'm on his computer. But I think it's serving the song and serving the emotion and serving the idea, the artist. Mm-hmm. I think we get ourselves into trouble as co-writers and when you're just a songwriter, as where you're making it too much your own song sometimes. Like if the artist is really wanting to go into this, or at least this is just what I believe, I would rather help service the artist in what they're trying to say. Mm-hmm. And, you sprinkle in some of your stuff there too. And so does the other co-writer, however many you have. I think that's the beauty of co-writing. But the editor thing, thanks for saying that. Cause I do feel like there's so many gifts for creators that are understated sometimes. Like we always talk about with Shane McAnally, who's a good friend of ours, amazing talent. I feel like Shane has all these like loud gifts, but then two of his like quieter gifts that are hugely important is he keeps the room moving in the best way, and he brings out the absolute best in everybody. because he's such a great collaborator. He loves like what you're saying, what so-and-so's singing. I mean, it's a very great energy, and it makes you, when you writes with him, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm the best writer ever, you know?
No, I always judge my co-writes by when I leave, do I want to go write another song? Or am I just like, God, let this day be done?
I know where you feel just beat down. We've all had those. We had one together, lest we forget.
That's true. He is great that way because he really, one of his major talents is he sees the talents in others, and he's not threatened by this.
No.
You know, you just hit on
because that's the right we know very well too.
Oh, totally.
I mean, especially when you're sitting there with two peacocks and everybody's in and there's a peacock mood brewing where you can see them like facing off, and that's one of those days for me, at least. I leave like, oh my God, just like pour me 9,000 drinks of alcohol, please.
Oh yeah, that's not fun for anybody. You just touched on something. I was doing a podcast or something last week, and somebody asked me the difference between writing songs for myself or just writing songs, and then when I'm writing with another artist. And I think you locked into something that takes so many people so long to figure out. When I used to have a write with another artist, I would stay up all night trying to find an idea. And then I started to realize they never want to write these ideas. They want to write their idea.
Totally.
And then I started looking at my own records, and I would look at the songs, and not all of them. And many of the songs on my records were actually your idea.
Oh gosh.
But more of the songs than not were an idea that I had brought in, because you feel close to it. You know,
totally.
like,
and even like when you record, like if I bring an idea for us, and I just had this happen with another artist recently, like that I just got the demo back today and love it, but you bring the title in, but then you watch the artist really know what to do with it in a way that you might not have fully had it flushed out. You know what I mean? Like you always have great ideas, but you have great angles too. I mean, where like a title to me might mean something, and then you'll be like, bam, I'm like, duh, that's how it should be, you know?
That is the beauty of collaboration. I think if you can't be open to that, you shouldn't collaborate.
I agree. And you and I always talk about too, how spoiled you can get by it, because then writing by yourself, it starts to become difficult to trust yourself as much, I think, because you're so used to having these other brilliant minds to bounce things off of. But I do think writing by yourself is almost a necessity, honestly, even if it's just to hash out an idea, you know, because
in this quarantine time, have you been spending time writing by yourself?
Yes, I have. More than honestly I have in a really long time, because I mean, I can play instruments like guitar or piano, but I'm not a great player. So it's not my natural thing. I'm like totally driving in a room. So when I get to sit by myself and be slow about things, it's funny though, the different things you'll come up with. It is interesting.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's like freeing kind of in a way at the same time.
It is. And sometimes you don't want to compromise.
Yes.
Like you have an idea that you feel really strongly about, and you just, part of co-writing is compromise. It's part of the beautiful part of it, because I think a lot of times with that compromise, you end up in a more commercial lane.
I agree, because it is like 3 minds or 2 minds or however many these days. But I mean, like you're saying, for the compromise, I mean, thank God you didn't write Get High with anybody else, because we wouldn't have Get High as we know it, which is the best.
That's true. I love it.
As soon as this is over, I'm kidding.
So, on that note, we have kept Jessie a while, but I want to ask you one more question on the way out here. I thought this would be a fun one for you.
Okay.
Dream cut, dead or alive artist.
Oh my gosh.
I've not asked anybody else this.
Who would you say? That is so hard.
I mean, for me, it would be Patsy Cline for sure.
Oh yeah,
it would be actually.
I have 2, okay. And I kind of think they say everything about me as a writer too. Is Hank Williams Sr.
Oh yeah.
And the Rolling Stones.
I knew it was going to be the Stones for sure.
I mean, can you imagine? like, especially, okay, this should be part of it too. If you got to experience during like their height, like Patsy's height and the Stones' height. I mean, I literally would just walk outside every day and be like, everyone kiss my ass. You know what I mean? I have a freaking Stones cut. But
yeah, I mean, oh, that was a good answer. Yeah, you bet.
Hey, I have a question before we go to. Will you tell everybody a story about your grandma?
Oh, I love it. See, one thing I've always said is that I feel like my grandma sent me Jessie Jo from heaven because
I believe it.
would have loved Jessie Jo. They would have had a smoke together. Your style, would have loved your style. Man, let me think of something really. I mean,
the airplane one is pretty great.
So one time my grandma, she was alive when you could smoke on planes, which I can't even imagine that now, but
even as a smoker, I can't either. That's just normal.
So she was flying. They were flying from Seattle to Charlotte, North Carolina, straight through flight.
Long
ass flight, and it was the first flight after they had cut the smoking off the planes, and so they get to Charlotte, but the weather's rough, so they can't land, so they just have to circle. And my mom said that my grandma was she'd had it at this point. People are screaming because they're afraid the plane's going to go down. And my mom says, but my grandma's not scared. She just wants a cigarette. And so, but nobody really knows that. But my uncle leans over and says to my grandma, hey, Mom, what are you going to do if this plane goes down? She said, light up a cigarette and say, prosecute me on the ground.
The best ever.
Yes.
I mean, your grandma, I'll meet her someday, but you know what I mean? I wish I could meet her like today.
You're a little bit of her on this planet. I mean, one of the things I said in my intro was that I hoped everybody would get what an amazing character you are. And that was my grandma. I mean, she was my favorite character in life. But Jessie, you're right up there.
Thanks for saying that, B. Same. I was telling Ben earlier, I was like, Brandy is my best friend. She's like my sister. Like just when we were talking about doing this.
We're the same.
I know.
So I will let you go. We will let you go. But thank you.
Now I already just want to come back. Next, if we do it again, we should just talk crazy life questions or something. Would be fun.
I would love that. We need to do one. We need to do one like that. And off the record.
Yes. Oh gosh, that would be fun.
Yes.
Yeah. Look at me. I'm already like lit up.
All right.
Off the record. Yeah.
Tune in next week. We'll see you then.
Bye, guys.